Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Desert Underground podcast. I'm Desert Danish, out here broadcasting today out in Lakewood, California. Mr. Matt Wadley, my co-host, could not be here today, but I am here with the illustrious Don Ian. How you doing, Don?
I'm good.
I'm glad you're here.
Thanks for coming.
Um, I know. I think I've known you for about 8 or 9 years.
Is it that long?
Yeah, it was 2010, I believe, when I met you.
Right.
You were on a USO
Yeah.
music tour out in Southwest Asia.
2010. Is it that long ago? Yeah, 2010, and we met you. This was it Thanksgiving or was it Christmas or was it in the middle of the year? I don't remember.
Oh, I want to say it was towards the beginning of the year.
We couldn't tell seasonally because everything looks the same. I was there 3 different times during the year.
I want to say April or May.
And so it was, that was the spring break time.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did 3 of them.
All within the year?
No, it was over a course of about a year and a half, over 18 months. We were there 3 times. And I remember the time I think that we were there, you were at, what was the name of the camp that you were at?
I was in Basra at the time.
Basra. So that was
the most south part of Iraq.
Right. That was the middle time that we were there, as I remember.
Okay.
My memory is getting fuzzy, but I think the first time we were there was in late 2009, and then we were there twice in 2010. So in the middle of 2010, yeah.
Were you ever there around 4th of July?
No, this would have been after that.
Okay.
Or I mean, before that. It was. I know that it was that time because it was around Easter. It was before Easter. Yeah.
I only remember because all right, just a little backstory. I was in Iraq, deployed in the Army. Don was in a band called Broke Down Cadillac.
Correct. That time, yeah.
Which I'd like to jump into a little bit in a minute here.
Sure.
About how that inception happened.
Sure.
And then they go on tours. It's called the USO tour. I assume you guys went all over war-torn areas and entertained the troops.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to get into like how that happened, but that's exactly what we would do. We would leave here. You'd leave Los Angeles, leave from LAX, and fly to Dulles in Washington, D.C., where there's usually some sort of a layover. Sometimes it could be 2-3 hours. Sometimes it was 45 minutes, whatever, but there's usually some sort of a layover in there, and you hang out in the thing, and then the real horrible part of the flight would happen, which is like, I think it was like 18 hours in those days.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure it's the same now. It's only 10 years ago, so it's like it was about 18 hours plus the 6 hours that it would take to get to Dallas, 6.5 hours. So it was a long day. It was basically an entire day of traveling. And then once you got there, we would fly into Kuwait, and which is still sort of reasonably civilized, like an actual airport and everything like that.
Right.
And
yeah. You can kind of roam around and not feel endangered.
Yeah. They give you kind of like things like don't take pictures of people. Don't pull, because then we were just it feels like so long ago now, but it was again 2010. I guess that's 8 years ago. 2009 I think was the first time we were there. So basically 9 years ago, and phones were different in those days. It's funny, because nobody had an iPhone. We all had like Blackberries, and I guess there were some iPhones and stuff, but you're still taking pictures with your phone of everything,
Right.
And they would tell you don't take pictures of people because that'll get you in trouble. Like in Kuwait, there were actual laws that were passed, like you can go to jail for that, and you're not supposed to take pictures of people, particularly the ladies. They have their faces covered,
absolutely. They definitely closely guard that.
Don't do this. So and I remember the first thing I did was I got off a plane. I got off the plane, and in the airport there's like shops, and one of the shops is Claire's. It's like a I don't even know if they have that store anymore, but it was a store for like junk, like girls stuff,
right.
And I remember because my daughter was little at the time. She was just about she was maybe in 1st or 2nd grade, something like that. And I remember, and her name is Claire. So and she loved the store Claire's. So it was all like girl stuff, like Hello Kitty type stuff. And she loved that store, and I thought it would be cool to take. The first thing I did was I got off the plane and take a picture, and the guy's like, don't take pictures of stuff here, and I'm like, oh, okay. And I put my phone away. But so you'd fly into Kuwait, and then from there, you had to go through customs and all that crap, and then you get on a bus, and it was another I don't know, another hour or two to the base, which you weren't stationed there, but then we would
No.
invariably would stay there. You'd check in
Everybody kind of goes through there,
through there,
though.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So you know that I think I can't even remember what the name of the camp was. Camp, I'll think of it.
I think maybe it was called Wolverine, Camp Wolverine.
Right, and we would go there, and you get into your room. That was one of the few places where you actually had like a room to yourself, and then from
No,
there,
that's one of the places you had a
yeah,
room to yourself. You were Mr. VIP over there.
yeah, we had a room to ourselves, which was, and they
I
were
had
kind
a
of like,
40-person tent
yeah,
with a cot.
you're right. Yeah, right. That's I know, and we knew that we were getting like pretty good treatment too, because they
Right.
would let us know like, hey, and the food was good, and but it was like I remember we would stay there, and you're so tired by the time you get there anyway, and they whisk you off, and you do a show that evening usually, and there was a really nice stage there. I don't remember what the name of the camp was, but it was a pretty nice stage, and it really packed. One of the biggest crowds that we would play to was at this place, and everybody was really cool. And then like the next day you're out of there. You do your show there and you have to meet a bunch of people. But the next day then you get on a plane and they take you, I forget what the plane was. What's the big sort of cargo? Was it one C1
The C-130 is kind of
C-130,
a
right?
little smaller.
hmm
And then there's the C-17s.
No, the C-130 was the one we took. That's the one that they've had that plane for 50 years. That
Sure.
goes back to the 60s. Those are the planes. That's right. I
Just
remember.
kind of like a big bus.
hmm Right, and they take you from there. You fly into. That's when they fly you into like Iraq. You go into Iraq, and they would never tell us where we were going. We weren't allowed to. This was in the sort of the early days of social media too, and everybody was on Facebook in those days. I'm sure that I'm not as active on Facebook anymore, but I know that. But in those days, everything was about Facebook, and that was one of the sort of the admonitions they give you is don't post stuff on Facebook. So so once you get into Iraq, you're there and you're going from camp to camp to camp or forward operating bases that fob this and fob that or whatever the name of the places were, and they would never tell us where we were. So by the time we got to you, I mean, we had no idea where we were, but I'd heard the name Basra from watching the news. I remember during the heavy days of the war when the war first broke out, everything was about Basra. It was just one of those places that you kept hearing. I kept hearing Basra before they got into Baghdad, as I'm remembering. Again, this is 10 years ago. I'm not
Right.
this could be all wrong, but I do remember Basra. And by the time we got there, I go, oh, it's a place I've heard of. So anyway, and I do remember your camp particularly because it was like it was more. It seemed like it was more developed than a lot of the camps we were at. There were more people there, and I remember like there was a sort of more the show that we did that night. I remember I still remember it was kind of an odd shaped stage. It was like real narrow.
Right.
And I remember my gear, like they didn't my amp. They put my amp off to the side of the stage. It was just the things that you remember. I just remember that.
So did you have like a road crew with you?
Yeah, you go. It was really cool. I remember when we first got the call to do these tours. I'm thinking like, I don't know how much I can swear on this thing. I'm checking
all you want.
I'm checking my language.
No, all you want.
But I'm thinking like, holy shit, what am I going to do with my gear? I'm thinking like, how am I going to get it overseas? Because it's hard enough to travel. Like that's always the first thing is like, okay, well, I got an amp. Like my usual amp is like a 212 combo, and it's probably close to 90 pounds. Traveling with it is a drag,
Right.
So you try to have hopefully something that, like, if you're just doing a flyaway day, you try to have hopefully something that you can just have there. So I'm thinking like, how am I gonna? This is gonna be like, I guess the State Department will pay for it or whatever, but. So then they're like, no, don't worry about it. You don't have to bring an amp. They'll have amps there for you. Then they called me and they said, what kind of an amp do you want? I said, well, I usually use this amp, like an Vox AC15 or AC30, which is what I would travel with, or a Fender Twin or something, whatever.
The heaviest one you can find.
Yeah, yeah. Do you want a combo? Do you want a head and cabinet? And I go, I usually just travel with like a 212 combo, like 100 watt or 30 watt, whatever it is. So they said, okay, we'll have one there for you. And I'm like, well, that was easy. So I get there and it's not even an AC. It's not in Vox at all. It's a Mesa Boogie amp,
Right.
which is what I used the whole time I was there. But they have a company that's based out of Kuwait, and it's like I forget what they're called, but you'd go there and all the gear was there. They had a PA system everywhere, and these guys, they had like a road crew. It was like 2 or 3 guys that would, I think it was two guys who spoke no English at all. I don't remember what country they were from. Nice, they're nice. They didn't speak very much English, but they were friendly, and our guy who was a sound guy who traveled with us, and they were just like the three of them always went off and did their own thing, like a crew would do. They didn't hang out with us much, but they were always like, they slept in the same quarters, and
Right.
they were almost like, if we had interviews to do, they were never with us. But anyway, yeah, we'd get there and there would be all this really cool gear, and it was like they were like, "Is this amp gonna work for you?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it'll be fine." We would check it out before we would leave.
What if you say no?
They'd get something else.
Okay.
I remember,
Yeah.
but I remember this one particular amp was like, I said, I think in those days I was using orange amps. That's I think it's one of the first things you and I talked about was I was using orange amps. And so I got to the gig and the amp was red. It was a Mesa Boogie amp and it was red. And I think they thought, like, he wants an orange amp, like not like
So
not
they
like
thought maybe you
the
just wanted
brand.
a
He just wanted the
certain
color. Yeah,
It's part of your brand. It's
as
your
long
thing.
as long as it was like a close to that color, it would be all right. They didn't. I don't think they were thinking about like the actual brand orange.
Oh wow.
And
Yeah.
and I was like, I was cracking up. I'm like, well, it'll be fine. It's like it's a Mesa Boogie amp, and it was loud as hell, and it was great.
It's one of those you got to adapt and overcome and just kind of roll with the punches sort of thing or
Well, yeah, that particular. I mean, for the kind of stuff that we were doing, and the kind of playing I do, I don't need the amp to do. I'm not one of those guys that has to have like. I want the amp to be fairly loud and fairly clean for what I do, particularly for that stuff. Like I want it to have a good sort of drive, but it doesn't need to because I have pedals that do that kind of stuff.
And so what kind of songs were you guys doing? I remember Proud to Be American was one of them.
Yeah, that's right. You got a good memory. That was a cover that we did. In those days, that band was doing mostly original music. It was
Okay.
two songwriters that it was. They got this gig. It's funny because it's all interconnected now. We had done a movie. I mean, that's how the whole thing started.
Okay, yeah, so the whole inception of it. We had talked about this last year, but
Right. We did a movie that it was a movie for Disney. I got a call one day, because I play for a lot of different bands, and that's what I've been doing for years. Is like I'm a side man. It's like I get calls to come and play with. People say like, "Well, what band do you play with?" And I'm like, "I play with a lot of bands." And I
throw a dart, you'll find
yeah,
it.
exactly. I don't, and for years, I would I go out on the road with different people, and usually they just, if you see a band that's like put together for an artist to go out on the road, chances are you'll see somebody like me in there who like gets the call and plays the gig.
Like a hired gun.
Right. Like it would be me, and like there's any number of guys around town that you'd see all the time that would be in different bands, particularly in those days. You don't see that as much anymore. Around what I noticed was around, we had that big sort of financial meltdown around 2008. And after that, it took a couple years to kind of like filter into the music business. But I used to do a lot of traveling and a lot of getting calls and going out on the road and stuff. And we're not doing that as much anymore. There's just not as much of that kind of activity right now, at least that I notice. Music has really changed since then, even just in the last few years. We're only talking about 8 or 9 years ago, and the music business has changed dramatically, and what people do musically and how they record. Like you were talking about, you doing a lot of recording at home. I mean, I used to go to the studio and record, and I would actually drive to somebody's studio and recording studios all through the 90s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. We were going to a studio to record, and nowadays you're just going to somebody's house.
And were all those out here in LA, or were
Yeah.
you ever anywhere else?
Yeah, and I've recorded in other places too, but like there was a lot of studios here in town, and those have gradually. I mean, people now are all recording in their homes. Now, any times I get calls to go record, I'm usually going to somebody's house.
Right.
I used to go to studios, but anyway, so I got this call to do this gig, and I was playing for lots of different bands and stuff at the time, and again, this was like around 2008, I guess. So, that's 10 years ago now. And I got this phone call from a buddy of mine, a guy that I knew from playing around town. And he said, "Hey, there's this band that I'm working with, and they need somebody to play slide. And I thought of you. They want to do all this kind of greasy country slide type stuff, which is something that I do." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. Well, why is this different than any other thing?" And he goes, "Well, they want to do a movie there." And I was like, the whole thing didn't make any sense. Usually it's like, I got this gig, come do
You
this
got
gig.
one of those faces. It's great for
Yeah,
TV.
yeah, it's great for radio. I've got a face made for radio. The old joke. But he said they're doing a movie, and his look was like he was apologizing. He goes like, they're doing a movie, so you're gonna have to come do this movie. And I'm like, nothing you're saying is making any sense right now. You're calling me to come be in a movie, right? Is what you're saying. And he said, well, yeah, kind of, but we have to play these songs. And I'm like, so it's a band, but it's a movie. I don't really understand. So he said, yeah, so it's a movie for Disney, and it's gonna be about this much money. And there was like an obscene amount of money for a traveling musician. I was like, why would I say no to this? You're offering me a ton of money. You're saying I'm going to be on the set and make a movie. Why would I not do this? And I'm like, I'm trying to figure out what the catch is. And he goes, well, and I think the catch was I hadn't heard the songs yet. So
right,
that's
right.
what it was, right? So, but I heard the songs and he was like, it's like modern country, but it's kind of not. And I'm like, oh God.
Think of the money. Think of the
Yeah,
money.
that's exactly what I did. It was like, like every once in a while
you
have
sold
to,
out. That's what you did,
I
man.
did. Well, sometimes, the funny thing is that a lot of times, it was just before I even met these guys.
Sure.
And they sent me a pile of songs. I seem to remember there being about 10 songs, 10 or 11 or 12 songs, which is not a lot to learn or whatever, but I listened to them and I couldn't even get through them. I was like, I don't think I like this music. I don't think I want to do this. It doesn't feel like me. And all I kept thinking like, well, you should probably do it. You should probably, and as a matter of fact, that's what my buddy said. He goes, let's just take one for the team. Let's just do this because I think we should do it because it's a fair amount of money. You're going to get paid a day rate on the film. Plus you're going to get this, that, and the other thing. And I thought, okay, I'll do it. And I hadn't done anything with Disney. And I had a buddy of mine who was an actor that I was working with at the time. And he was like, I think you should do this. I think you should work for Disney. I think you need to be in business with these people. They're good people. And it's, at the very least, you're going to meet a lot of really nice people. And So then this started this whole whirlwind. I was like, okay. I mean, all I did was say yes. It's like the old thing of like, all I did was answer the phone. I didn't really do much.
Right.
I answered the phone. And I didn't know these guys from it. And I listened to these songs and I just kind of did my homework. I listened to the songs and I thought, oh, I think I can add something to this. Because they were just acoustic demos. Really, it was just, and it was a girl singer who was pretty good. I thought the singer was good. I thought, well, that's a plus. The songs I thought were, they were, some of them were okay. Some of them I didn't think were that good. And I was trying to figure out, like anything, I don't know if you've had this experience, but people send you, when you're working with somebody, you think, the first thing I think of as a player is like, I don't know if I can add anything to this. Can I add anything to this? Am I right for this? And I learned that, I think, from working with so many actors for years, because they always do that. And I thought that was the coolest thing the actors are cool. They don't just like good actors. I'm not talking about anybody who's just trying to get on it.
Right.
I'm talking about somebody I've worked over the years. I don't know. I made a joke that if there's an actor playing a guitar, I probably taught them. If you're watching TV and there's an actor playing the guitar, it was probably me that taught them how to do that. There was a period where all I was doing was teaching actors how to play the guitar, which is cool. I'm like, I'd be watching a TV movie and I go, I taught that guy.
Yeah.
Like, look at that. But anyway,
there's nothing that bugs me more than like when I'm watching something and the person doesn't know how to play and they clearly don't know how.
There's two things that bother me. One is like if a guy's just completely making a hash out of playing the guitar.
Right.
That pisses me off. Because I don't, again, like I said, I don't know of an actor that doesn't have a guitar. He should know something. And the other one is when I see people smoking on TV and they don't smoke. It pisses me off. It's like, I'm watching TV with it's funny because I've got a 15-year-old daughter who's never smoked. And we were watching TV the other night and she goes, that guy's not a smoker. There's some scene and the guy's like lights up a cigarette and she goes, he's clearly not a smoker. And I'm like, that's so funny. She's picked up on that from me now. She's like, I can't stand it when I see somebody not smoking, when they're acting smoking.
Right.
Just smoke the fucking cigarette. Don't. It pisses me off. It's like, why do it? In this day and age, there's so few people that smoke. Why do it? You're clearly doing it for an effect.
Right. And a lot of times it doesn't really enhance or do anything.
Do something else. Like, why don't you just look at your phone?
Vape.
Yeah, vape. There you go. Do something lame. Like, look at your freaking phone and like check your Facebook status or check your Snapchat streaks or whatever it is. Instead of like lighting up a cigarette, it looks ridiculous. But anyway, so getting back to these songs, I'm like, I listen to the songs and I'm like, okay, I'll do the best I can. And I meet them. We get together for this one rehearsal. And I show up and I'm, got my stuff and I say, hello, how are you? And the first thing that the singer says to me, not there's a girl singer and like it's a girl and guy combination.
Mm-hmm.
And he's sort of the songwriter and she's he's the sort of writer guy and she's the singer. It's kind of like the Carpenters, or I don't even know. Like, are there any other duo where like the guy's kind of the musical aspect and she's the face and the singer, right? So that's the way it is. But they write the songs together. And I meet them and she's very nice. She's very friendly
And she had great stage presence
she
when
was
I saw you
terrific.
guys.
Oh
yeah.
no, she was everything right with that band. And he was very the very first thing he says to me, he walks over and he goes, "Hi, how's it going? I love what you do." He'd seen me somewhere or something. He goes, "I love what you do, but you're gonna have to cover up your tattoos." First thing he says. That's the first thing he says. Like, this is for Disney. You can't have tattoos.
Right.
And I remember thinking, like, well, first of all, I'm not as tattooed as you. I mean, you're tattooed. I have a tattoo or two.
Yeah, you've got a little bit on your forearm.
I've got a little on my forearm, and I have a couple on my because in those days I was not wearing lots of sleeves on shirts, so I have like two.
They
here.
just get in the way, really.
Right. So I'm thinking like, okay, what? And I was like, I thought, well, I'll wear a shirt. It's not a big deal. I know it's Disney, but whatever. I mean, it felt like we were back in the Stone Age all of a sudden. It's like, old son, you can't work at the grocery store if you got your hair too long.
What is that, an earring?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I felt like it was back in the 50s. Like, you're going to have to trim those sideburns if you're going to work at the DMV, son. So I was like, whatever. And that's immediately I kind of felt like I was like on the defensive. I'm like, oh, fuck, all right, whatever.
Here we go.
Yeah, here we go. Like, it's like, is this even worth? I don't even want to do this.
You should try joining the army.
I felt like
see how that is.
I felt like I was being a nice guy who got asked on a date who was doing a blind date with a girl he didn't want to go out with anyway. That's what I felt like. I felt like, oh fuck, why am I even here? I don't even want to be here. So anyway, I just kind of grit my teeth and I played the music. And the first rehearsal was okay. It wasn't great. It was all right. We kind of like got through some songs and.
I think that's most first rehearsals.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm used to things being up and running. I don't like to have to rehearse. I mean, I play in so many bands where with guys who play, a lot of times we don't rehearse. I literally don't see them until the first gig. I'm like, hey, how's it going?
See, that's intriguing to me because I come from rural areas that generally, we start in a garage and we all just kind of start playing a little bit and, we really build it up and work it up, but you live in a super huge cultural hub of musicians. For us, it was like, gosh, is there a drummer in this town at all?
It's a different
and it was so strange to hear that side of it where it's like, I just, you just said you show up.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that it's kind of, there's kind of two parts to that. One is that, yeah, you show up and you play the gig and it should sound okay. But a lot of times, you find that you're playing with the same people all the time. You know what I mean? For such a huge pool of people, I often tend to play with the same people. You know them all.
Cream of the crop, right?
Well, yeah, sometimes that's why it's so nice when there's somebody new. And I think that probably worked in my favor for a while. Was that I was a newer person, and it was like, wow, somebody new who we don't know who sounds pretty good all the time, and that's awesome. But eventually, it's like anything. You hang around long enough, and people know what you do, and. Like I get a lot of calls for the same things. Like again, this guy calls and says we want you to play slide because he knew that I was one of the guys that was around town that was playing slide.
That is something that eludes not just my brain, a lot of people's brain. And I'm not a great musician, but I can hold my own on a few chords here and there. But you said dirty slide earlier, and I was like,
yeah,
I just can't.
It's a texture that people like to hear. I think we deal in. As a guitar player, what you're really dealing with is you're dealing as a guy who does the kind of work I do. People want to hear certain things. Again, I bring it back to like being an actor. Like an actor, they have a particularly certain like character actors. They have a particular palette that they do. I remember meeting a guy years ago. He said I was talking to him, and I clearly was an actor because he looked like. There was a period when every actor looked like Joey on Friends. They all looked exactly the same. They all had the same leather jacket and they all had the same haircut. And it was like, and I remember he says, yeah, I'm an actor. I do New York. He said that to me. He said, I'm an actor, I do New York. And I'm like, holy crap. This guy clearly did not go to like the fucking to the Shakespeare, he's not like,
That's all he does.
yeah, I do New York. And I'm like, he's been watching movies and he probably does like Harvey Keitel.
Right.
By the way, Harvey Keitel is one of my favorite actors. He's a terrific
sure.
actor. I don't mean, but I mean, there's a whole subset of actors that only do that, But anyway, so that's,
I was watching a movie the other day with him in it. I can't remember which one though.
Mean Streets, Taxi Driver.
No.
Oh, he's
It was one of those things where it just caught me off guard because it was a small role for him. And I said, "Is that Harvey Keitel?" And then it was.
He's been in a ton of movies.
Reservoir Dogs was a great one with him.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, Harvey Keitel is. We were watching something the other day, and he just stole the movie from me. What was it? It was a movie called. I'd never seen it before. The Two Jakes, Jack Nicholson. This sort of like sequel to Chinatown that he directed back in like 1988 or 89, and Harvey Keitel just is so great in it. He's so great in it. It's not a great movie. It's a good movie, and it was enjoyable. I'd never seen it, but Harvey Keitel. I don't know that I've ever seen him in anything I thought that he was bad in. I think,
yeah,
he's like a perfect kind of,
but you know what you're getting with him too,
right? You're right. He's not gonna. Nobody's gonna cast him in Hamlet.
He does New York.
Exactly. Nobody's gonna cast him in Hamlet. But which is probably our loss. But like I'm saying, like, so I get these phone calls. People want to hear a certain thing. It's like, oh, that's that guy. He can do that slide thing. He can give us that sound. I've heard it on other records, and that guy can do that. So I know that. They're not like looking for me to like reinvent the wheel. They just want me to go,
That's the guy.
Like you were talking about when we did. I remember you were saying we did, what was it? Proud to be an American or whatever that song is, that Lee Greenwood song.
Right.
Now that's pretty corny, but I remember like we did it, and I remember specifically thinking like, how can I make this? Because we were a small band, and I was thinking like, how my normal shtick on this song would be to play it. Like I remember specifically doing these long, slow slide bends on there, like kind of thing like that. And if you go back and watch any of the videos on YouTube of that, I remember thinking that sounded pretty good. That was I thought that my instinct on that was right. Instead of playing it like whatever. But then I remember like lots of big power chords on it and stuff like that too. Just kind of trying to give it some weight, because otherwise it's like it's like a ballad. It's like an acoustic ballad. I don't want that to be I wanted it to be fairly big. Like these big,
Yeah.
But yeah, like the slide thing, or like the other thing is I get a lot of calls because I'm one of the few guys in town that plays 12 string. And like, because I was in, I was a lot of bands growing up. I was like the Birds, and I've always gravitated toward 12 string and like playing. So I'm one of the few guys that you just don't see guys around with a 12 string guitar, an electric 12 string.
I dabbled one time
with electric 12 string.
Not electric 12 string.
See, that's what I'm talking about.
Okay.
Like an acoustic 12 string. That's like a folky,
sure,
60s kind of. You don't hear that very much anymore either. You don't hear a lot of 12 string at all. But like electric 12 string, like the Birds, like a Birdsy, or like the early Beatles sort of Hard Day's Night thing. You just don't hear guys. First of all, they're expensive. It's an expensive bit of gear to walk around with, and they only, you'd only want to hear it on one or two songs.
Yeah, I was gonna say you hear that the whole show. It's gonna be.
It gets
like,
old fast.
Okay.
So
I recently bought a 6-string banjo and realized how quickly people get tired of it. I played two songs.
I saw the picture, and I was like, "Is that it's a banjo that's tuned like a guitar, like a
yeah?
What do they
so
call that?
It's a guitar neck,
band guitar or something."
So people call it all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what Dane calls it, which is the company that made it, is a 6-string banjo.
Right.
Technically
tuned like a guitar.
Yeah, tuned exactly. And see, I'm lazy, so I've tried playing banjo before, and it's tuned a little different than a guitar.
Yeah, I came back from one of these tours that you were talking about, one of these USO tours, and usually after every tour I would have a couple of bucks in my pocket and some time off. And I would always think and this happened 2 or 3 times when I'd come back from these tours, and I'd go like, well, I've got a couple of bucks. My attitude is like, before I take the money and pay bills with it or whatever, like I always like to carve out a little bit and turn it back into the business and do something cool with it. And one particular tour, I had a couple of bucks, and I thought, I'm gonna grab a banjo because I don't have one. And it was at this time, he started hearing a lot of banjo on records. This was a few years ago. You don't hear it as much anymore, but there was a period there for about 2 or 3 years, a year and a half, 2 years maybe, where you're hearing a lot of banjo on records. I don't know, like Mumford and Sons type
Right.
thing.
I listen to a lot of I don't like admitting it, but lately I've been listening to a lot of like hipsterish music
Sure. I just
and
love
like
banjo.
folky hipster
Mhm.
stuff. And there's this guy I started listening to last year called Amigo the Devil, and he did I think most of his first album with his just him and a banjo.
Right.
And the guy does these great songs. You know,
But
really
mhm.
introspective,
You
like
mean you talking like sort of
lyrically.
Pete Seeger type, or is it
Um,
more?
I don't know how to explain it. It's just very. It feels very raw. Just like it's almost like a guy in an acoustic is very raw, but with the banjo, it's such a hard hitting instrument where you're not playing super power chords or anything on it. You're just plucking.
It's loud. Were you kind of like surprised at how loud it is?
I was. In fact, someone told me I never played it. I just bought it 2 weeks ago,
Yeah.
and I played it at a show. And one of the things my friend told me is he goes, "Man, you don't have to hit it so hard."
Yeah.
I was like, "Okay,
They're
it's good to know."
well, the first thing I did was I got the banjo and I tried to figure out immediately went to work trying to figure out how I could bring it on stage. As I usually do. It's like
That's easy for me when it's a solo act.
right, exactly. And I was thinking, well, the first thing I got to do is I got to figure out how to amplify it. So I had to buy a pickup for it, and kind of
That's my next step.
it's like a little bit of a project. Excuse me one second. Hey, my dog is acting up over here. Knock off. Welcome to my home. But anyway,
It's actually nice. I heard the birds chirping earlier, and I
it's
was like,
beautiful
"Oh,
here,
that's
isn't it?
something none of the other podcasts have."
It's really beautiful here, like Lakewood,
This is
California.
gorgeous.
Isn't it great
I've
here?
never been here, and I've been to all the crappy parts of LA, but this is a gem.
Isn't it great?
Yeah.
I'm glad you thought so. Yeah, because that was my feeling too. We were driving around here some years because I lived in LA for 30 years. And my daughter was born in Los Angeles, and she considers herself to be an Angelino. And my wife and I met and got married there. And matter of fact, you're going to Santa Monica later. My wife and I were married in Santa Monica.
Oh wow!
And
I know I went there as a kid at one point. I've never seen the pier. I don't know if I'm doing that today or not. I'm just meeting a friend for lunch, but
it's a beautiful community. And
yeah.
we were married in Santa Monica. I don't even remember why we were married other than because we weren't living in Santa Monica. We were living in Los Angeles at the time. Living in I've always lived in Hollywood, area. And I think we got married in Santa Monica because we liked the church. We got married at St. Monica's, which was a gorgeous sort of big Catholic church there that we got married at in those days. And this was right before we got married, right before the big earthquake, and the church was closed for years. Like they had to remodel the church
wow.
because the whole front facade of it came down in the earthquake and stuff like that. So we just snuck in right before the earthquake. We were married, but anyway, yeah, it's a beautiful. But this part of town is beautiful. It's like we were looking like after living in sort of like mid city Wilshire area for so many years. It's a great place. I was the only guy
Right.
I knew that lived there. All of my peers had moved to the valley. And I was the only one who wasn't of my friends that were musicians and stuff. Most of them were living in the valley at different spots in Burbank and Reseda or whatever. And several of my sort of peers had moved into like Eagle Rock and Silver Lake. That's like the last few years. That's sort of been the hipster
Right.
mecca.
Yeah,
And I didn't want any
I
part of
was
that.
thinking Silver Lake when I was a kid was a horrible place.
Right,
In the 80s, and
It was awful.
now it's like I was reading the other day that it's one of the prime places for people to live now.
Gentrified, yeah, it's absolutely that's the gentrification thing that influx of all the hipsters to. Yeah, that's not really something I've ever felt really comfortable with. There's nothing wrong with it. It's a nice area and everything, but I like, again, having a teenager, you start thinking about things like where they're going to go to school. When they're little,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
kind of different, but high school it's a different kind of vibe, and it's like, like when she was little and she was going to, there was a school right there on, right by the farmer's market in Los Angeles, on 3rd and Fairfax there. It was a really sweet little public school there that was really lots of parent involvement and stuff, and it was a really cool school. But the minute she went to middle school, the whole vibe changed. Middle school was really crappy, and there were private schools around there, but whatever. We sort of thought maybe it's a good time to look for something on the outskirts, and my wife knew about this area, and I had friends that lived out here. There was several bands that started out here too, the Blasters and
I'm not familiar with the Blasters.
Oh yeah, one of the big sort of bands from the '80s in Los Angeles that was a big sort of in the punk. Uh, really before they called it alternative.
Well, yeah, now I feel like a poser because I don't know it.
The Blasters and X and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, they're
Sure.
from this area. So this whole area is like, this is just North Long Beach, Cerritos, Lakewood, Bellflower. This whole area is really, really groovy. And I remember driving down the street, driving down Del Amo. We're looking for a place to live. And I saw this area and the trees on Del Amo down there where you see all these like streets lined with trees. And I looked at my wife and I said, why aren't we living here?
This area right here feels like once you get off the highway, it
Mhm.
feels very much like a town that could be like 50,000 people. Just a nice.
That's
know,
why I liked it. It felt like the towns that I
It's a
grew
little
up in.
town in a big city area.
Yeah, my wife and I both grew up in. We're both Californians, and we both grew up in. I grew up different places. You know, like I lived in when I was a kid. I lived in Modesto and Santa Rosa and some of these smaller towns, nice towns. And this was the kind of neighborhood I lived in. And I remember when I pulled up, when we decided we were going to take this house, and we got this house. I pulled up in front with my daughter, and she hadn't seen the house yet. And she says to me, she's probably she was, I guess, in the 7th or 8th grade at the time, 7th grade, sixth or 7th, middle school age. She looks at the neighbor and she goes, "This is what I always thought a neighborhood should be like." And I'm all, great, done deal. And it really is great. Yeah, I mean, it's like you just said about the birds chirping. It's like, dude, if you stay here long enough, you'll hear an ice cream truck.
Oh no.
You will hear an ice cream truck. You will hear
Wow.
birds. During the day, it's like because I'm the musician on the street, so I'm home during the day. Like I feel like I'm the neighborhood watch too. So like, do you know, like all these all the
You know
neighbors all
everything that's going on around here.
Well, we all watch each other's houses. I went to Europe. I was gone a couple months ago. We were in Europe for a few weeks, and I never had to worry about a thing. Anybody messing with the house or anything. My neighbor would come and make sure that my garbage got taken out. He'd make sure that there were my car was parked. There was some car parked in my driveway so that people thought somebody was home and get my mail and all that kind of stuff. Like it is real like that. There are places like this that do exist, and you do know your neighbors and stuff like that. So it's like after living for 30 years in mid Wilshire, it's like I feel like there's a feeling of like, wow, I needed that, and especially as somebody who has like musicians, I think tend to have a real unstable life. And so we tend, I don't know if you've noticed this, but a lot of my musician friends tend to be guys who stay married. You know, again, we live with so much instability that we get our stability where we can.
Right.
We have like, a lot of us have children. I know you have children, and it's like, and those are all things that really help you when your life is
I have a
chaos.
9 to 5 as well, though. which,
Yeah.
which takes away a lot from things I'd like to do or want to do, but it also feeds my guitar addiction. And
I think that's a great way to look at work. Work is and work is all good. Like I don't just. I've been fortunate that everything I do work-wise has to do with the guitar. But it's not all playing. A lot of times I teach. Like I was saying, I alluded to earlier, like if there's an actor you see on TV, I've probably taught him, and it's like, teaching is work. And it happens during the day. It doesn't happen at night, It's like a lot of what I do, or traveling. It's not all just being in front of audiences and stuff like that. It's like, and frankly, it's like it's a lot of downtime too. A lot of musicians I know, they don't like to admit it. We always try to look, especially with social media, we try to look like we're busier than we really are. But I've learned that the downtime is actually good for you. Like we were talking about the banjo a minute ago. It's like that was something that like I knew I was going to have some time off, and I wanted to make use of the time. I might as well learn something new, or like I bought a banjo. One particular time, I got a baritone guitar, and I spent a lot of time messing with the baritone.
a baritone, I'm not familiar with that.
Baritone guitar, like you'll hear that. I'm trying to think if I played baritone on any of the tracks that you would have heard. Probably not. I was working with a group from Nashville, a couple of songwriters, terrific songwriters. They're called Granville Automatic. And every time they would come to Los Angeles, they would just call, they know people here, and they don't travel with the band, they just call people here. As is often the case, most of the people, nowadays, a lot of people that I know that are working and traveling musicians, they just pick up musicians in the city where they're at. Oh, here you go, you hear this?
Yeah.
That's how you know you're in small town USA.
Oh, street sweeper.
There you go.
Oh, fantastic.
Right? My
Yeah, we
street.
should let them know we're doing a podcast
Right.
next time.
My street's clean. That's the last. And then the guy who gives you a ticket is following.
It's the only clean street in the LA
It's
area.
terrific. It's great.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, I actually made sure I threw a cigarette out in the street today so they could give him something to do because the streets. But anyway, yeah, I mean, most of the people we know, they travel and they pick up musicians where they're at. But these guys were coming to town, and one of those songs had a baritone on it. One of the songs that we were doing on stage, and I was like, I don't have a baritone. I could fake it. I could like tune my guitar down a little bit, or just play it on a 6-string or whatever. But I really liked the sound of the baritone, so I went and found a baritone guitar for like zero money on like Craigslist. I found one that was, and I paid like nothing for it, and I've used it ever since. I've used it for years now, and I trot it out. Depending on the act that I'm working with, I can usually find a little spot for it, and it's a really good. Again, you don't want to hear it more than once. It's good on one song. You don't after one
Yeah.
little bit of baritone, and it goes a long way. Same with the 12-string. Maybe on 1 or 2 songs.
So I'm going out on a limb finally after all these years, and I'm going to somebody's home studio, and he's got all the racks and racks of stuff. It's all not vintagey, but more 80s style racks that he's using, and he had this smoking deal that he put out on social media. Hey, if I'll do 8 hours a session for $150.
Right.
I'm like, well, I've been trying to record my own stuff for years now, and I'm never happy with it. Never happy with it, and I think that might be part of the whole process. You're never actually happy with the result until it's never perfected, or there's always a change you want to make or something. And at least in my opinion, that's where I've been. And so I'm going to go there, record 6 songs in 8 hours, all me. So I'm bringing my own, shakers and cajon and my banjo and my bass and all that stuff.
Right.
And I'm going to call it good, and I'm going to move on and move on to some other new stuff that I'd like to do.
I think it's a good. I think the best thing that you can do is have a second set of ears.
And I've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise, there's the street sweeper again.
Oh, all right.
This is awesome. This is the second side of the street. Thank you. Yes, it's totally live. We'll cut this out. But yeah, no, I think that for me, over the years, you have to learn these things, and at least that was my experience. Is that I remember being a kid the first time in the studio, and not liking what happened, and it's a learning curve. It's like doing anything else. It's like learning a language. It's like you have to keep doing it. You have to practice. You have to learn what to do. You also have to. I think for me, it's like you have to learn to deal with studio nerves. Is that an accurate? Is this performance accurate? Does this sound like what I sound like, or does it sound nervous? Does it sound whatever? And it really helps to have a second set of ears that you trust. And one of the ways that you get that, I think, is by working with people more than once. Don't just meet them, say, hi, my name's Bob Johnson, I'm going to be your engineer, and then do some crappy session and leave and never see the guy again. But if you're lucky enough to be able to do several things with them, over time he'll get to know you. And he'll know, like, there's one particular guy, if I need to go to the studio, which is we don't have to do that much anymore. But if I do a session, if I'm producing a track, I don't record at home. I'm not like you. I don't do that. I like to leave the house to record. And so what I'll do,
I'd like to, but I don't have that option.
Yeah, right. But what I'll do is that there's one particular guy that I work with, and I've been working with for the last maybe 7, 8 years, 6, 7, 8 years, and he's a terrific producer, and he worked, he's this guy named Johnny Lee Shell, who has a place out in the valley, and actually, so it's a bit of a schlep for me. It's a bit of a drive, but I'll just, it's like I'm comfortable working at his place. I know his place really well, and I like what he brings to the thing, which is that he's very calm, and I know that I can explain to him what we're doing. Okay, today we're gonna do. I want this to be kind of slow, and I want to do this like slow, sort of like trippy psychedelic number or whatever. And he'll just okay, and as I track with him over the course, because a lot of times I'll spend a lot of time. I might track the drums and the bass first. A lot of times, if I do a track, if I'm producing for somebody, I like to play a lot of the instruments myself. So I'll bring in a drummer. I've got a couple that I like to work with, and I'll track with him, and I'll play bass while he plays drums, or I'll play acoustic guitar to guide him or something like that, and I'll play bass later or whatever. But as I'm building the track, he'll say to me, I'll maybe be doing a part, and I can look at him and he'll go like, well, I think you can do one more. Or I'll look at him and I'll go like, what do you think of that? And he'll go like, I think it's pretty good. And if he says that, that's pretty much the most praise I'm going to get out of him all day.
Right.
He'll be like, I think it's pretty good. And if something's really bothering me,
thanks, Dad.
Yeah, and if something's really bugging me, then I might take it again. Or sometimes, and I've learned from experience too. You'll probably have this experience too. Give yourself the opportunity to develop an idea. Like, I don't think I like the way this is going. I'm going to try this, and try a few things, and don't let anybody rush you. It's your money, it's your dime, and then what I've found over the time is that a lot of times I'll do something first, and then I'll maybe try to expand on that and do something different, 3, 4, 5. Nowadays we have unlimited tracks. We don't have to worry. In the old days, we'd have to wipe the track.
We're not doing tape or anything.
So now with unlimited tracks, you have that luxury of being able to try, and I can sit there for like, I can screw away a half hour, 45 minutes trying stuff. It's my money. And then a lot of times I'll just come back to the original. But that's okay. That's okay. Sometimes it'll, and again, but it helps to have an extra set of ears who goes like, I think the first one was good, man. Let's try that one again. Let's listen to that one again. Let's take a break. So, and by means of contrast, if I'm working by myself, I will spend, if I'm by myself, the times that I do record by myself at home, which I try not to do that often, but if I do, I can kill 2, 3, 4 hours on 10 seconds of music. Like just trying to get this part. It doesn't feel right. And I will sit there and I'll screw around with it. And then I'll go back and listen to the first thing I did. Oh, that's fine. So you just don't know. But it is recording it's an art. It's an art. And that is one of the big frustrations of today that I feel, having had the good fortune of being able to record in the 80s as a youngster, and really be in some of the really great studios in Los Angeles. I caught the tail end of that era. These really great 24-track studios, tape, these beautiful Studer tape machines and whatnot. These great Neve consoles that people you would see in every recording studio. I caught the end of that. We didn't really know how good we had it, but it was a different kind of vibe, and it was, it was a good learning situation. But what I've seen over time, is that people, with all of our ability to do things so quickly now, I think we work too quick sometimes. And I've noticed a lot of, because we can work quickly, we tend to work quickly, and everybody wants to work. With a guy like me, especially, they call me in, and if they want me to play on the record or whatever like that, they just want it. They want it pretty fast. They don't want me to sit there and screw around all day.
Right.
Unless, it really depends. Sometimes they'll say like, well, what would you do differently? And I'm like, well, I might try this. What I've learned over the years, and you might have the same experience too, is that if I give somebody a track, like I play a track and I hate it, but they like it, I've learned to just let them. They're the ones paying the bills. It's like they get to have what they want. If I really hate it, and the idea of having that go out with my name on it is too much for me, if I really hate it, what I've learned to say is, I'll say, I think I can give that to you a little cleaner. Would you like me to try one more? And they'll go like, okay, and they'll let me do another one, and hopefully I'll get it better, But sometimes I've actually had people and I've had this experience any number of times. People go, no, I think it's great the way it is, and you have to just like, okay, well, there it is. It's your dime. I won't say it. I'll be thinking like, well, it's your dime, buddy.
Yeah, but I have a singer friend of mine that has a hard time realizing he's a really good singer.
Yeah,
and I have to keep telling him, no, you sound great. Like I couldn't even get close to how he sings, and how he does it is perfect for me every time, and it is never perfect for him. And he always wants to. It's like, no, I missed this note. I'm like, I didn't hear it. I listened back. I still don't hear it. It's very hard for someone to say, yes, this is where I'm at and this is great.
Singing is a drag. It really is. I mean, at least for me, I always joke that like if I'm doing a couple like this is a great example. Like a couple of years ago, I wrote this. I was talking about these people from Nashville, Granville Automatic, two great songwriters, young women from Nashville, and really good songwriters. And the the singer of the duo is a terrific singer. She was on American Idol, and her name is Vanessa. Really good singer. So they write lots of songs about like these sort of real rusticy kind of songs about history and stuff like that. And I wrote this tune with them, and a lot of their stuff is very alternative country sounding, very stripped down, very immediate sounding. And I wrote this song with them, and we wrote together. And I wanted to, as I was thinking, I thought, well, you know what? I like the tune that we're doing. I'd like to produce it. And they're all like, sure, you can knock yourself out. And I said, okay, I won't need you for a while. So I went off and I recorded the track myself. And it's so much fun. I'm making this track, and I made this sort of big Baroque, sort of psychedelic track, slow and trippy sounding, which is totally not alternative country sounding at all.
Right.
But it's my song. I mean, I wrote the song, and they wrote it too. And by the time they came to LA, which is the next time they were passing through to do some gigs, I go, I've got you for a couple of days. Let's cut the vocals on this. So they come to the studio and they're listening, and they're like, this is pretty good. But that's where for me, that's kind of where it bogs down. Is like, I mean, I can have the greatest time building a great instrumental track, but the minute you start dealing with the human voice, that is where you start to deal with you start to deal with the limitations. It's like what you're hearing. Maybe that voice doesn't do that. Maybe you can't communicate. Maybe I can't communicate fully. I remember this in this particular instance. I was saying what I wanted from her was I wanted her to just kind of sing easy on this one particular verse, and I used the term. I said, "Why don't you just croon it? Croon it like Bing Crosby."
Right.
And she looks at me. She goes, "Croon it?" Like, and I go, "Yeah, like just sing it easy. Don't try so hard on it. Just throw it out there." And she understood that, and then she was okay with it, But sometimes, just particularly when it comes to vocal or just recording in general with somebody else, it's communication. Like, how do we talk to each other? Do you understand what I want? Years ago, I was playing guitar on a record. I used to play with this band back. I still kind of do play with them. This really good sort of alternative country band called the Psychedelic Cowboys. And I think we've got two. I think they put two out in the last 15 years. They put out maybe two records.
Now,
Very slow.
Now that band has Jeff in it, right?
Yes.
And he was in Broke Down Cadillac.
Yes, exactly.
On the USO tour with you.
Right, exactly.
So I got some good pictures of him too.
Yeah, he's a terrific guy, and he was the guy who called me for the Broke Down Cadillac gig, and he was playing in different bands. He played in, I don't know if he still does anymore, but he used to play in like literally a different band every day of the week. He had a lot of different. We were both working a lot in those days. But the band that we met in was this band, the Psychedelic Cowboys, and this is back in the late '90s. It was an interesting band because it was a big band. There was like 7 or 8 of us initially, 6 or 7, 8 of us in the initial iteration of that band, and we all ended up we all got married around the same time. We all had kids the same year. Jeff likes to tell the story that we all had daughters the same year. All of us had daughters in 2002.
Oh wow!
And we thought it was funny. It was God's way of getting even with us for being such assholes. So we all had to have like how we had behaved around women our whole lives. We all had to learn how to be good guys and be decent dads with daughters. Having a daughter, as you know, having a daughter changes your your whole attitude. But anyway, so like we were doing a record years ago, the first one that we did, and I remember being in the studio with this guy. The songwriter in the band is a guy named John Harlan, and Harlan's got really particular ways of how he thinks about things and how he talks. And he tends to live in a different space than the rest of us. And I remember being in the studio, I was just barely knew him. I didn't know him very well. And I'm playing, and he'd heard me play, and I was playing on this record, and I'm playing guitar. And he kept asking me to play. He goes, I want to do something here. He talks like this. He says, I want to do something dancing. He calls me dancing. I want to do something like Jimmy Page. And I'm like, now, I don't know about you, but I think of Jimmy Page. I think Led Zeppelin, and
Right.
immediately I think of, I think Black Dog. I think, I think of Jimmy Page, the shredding Les Paul guy. He said, I'll do something like Jimmy Page, or like the acoustic guy, like the Over the Hills and Far Away, whatever, all these beautiful guitar textures. And I'm thinking, Jimmy Page, right, or whatever, what the hell? And it's this weird track. It's this kind of strange track. And he goes, I'm thinking of Jimmy Page. And I'm thinking, like, do you want, we went around and around with this Jimmy Page thing. We were there for hours. Hours. And I was like, I don't know what the fuck he's asking me. I would try different things, and he was like, no. And finally, it occurred to me, he let slip that he was talking about the Donovan song, Sunshine Superman. I don't know if you know that song or not. Great song from the 60s. Big hit song for Donovan. This is way before Led Zeppelin. Jimmy Page was a session player, and he had played guitar on this song. And what he was hearing was, instead of saying, I want to hear something like Sunshine Superman, that's all he had to say. I would have known exactly, like the Donovan song, this kind of cool little Chuck Berry kind of like, it's like a Chuck Berry thing really that he does on the song. If you go back, maybe you should like cut in a couple seconds of the song so people can hear.
Yeah. I'll throw a link on the website underneath it.
So, and I'm like, and finally, once I understood that that's what he was talking about, and then I got it, and we got it in like 5 minutes. All I did was do the exact same thing. I go, like this Chuck Berry thing, which is what he wanted. And he wanted it kind of clean. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm thinking Led Zeppelin. He wanted like Black Dog. He wanted some weird, like really complicated sitar line, like nothing. So then I realized the realization was that I had to learn how to talk to him. The playing was almost incidental. We would do the playing. The playing on the track would be fine. We would get to it. But the battle with this guy was learning how to talk to him. And it was a great lesson because it's the same with everybody. Anytime you get called to do a session, or a gig with somebody, the biggest hurdle is learning how to communicate with the person. Because playing in a band is, like I've said before, like playing in a band, it's a band, whether it's a band that's been together for 10 years or a band that's been together for 5 minutes, a band is it's an organism. It lives and it breathes. That combination of 4 and 5 people, or 3 or 4, 5, 6 people, whatever it is a discrete organism, and it's not right and it's not wrong, but it's very specific. The sound that people make together. That's why when you hear
I like that.
When you hear the Heartbreakers, as a good example.
Yeah.
Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers, which I think was really the last really great rock and roll band.
So I have to listen to them every time I come into LA area. It's something about it makes me less mad about driving here. And you mentioned Reseda earlier, so when I think of that, I just think of Tom Petty, living in Reseda. And I'm
it's a long day. Yeah. That's so funny because I remember driving. This must have been around 1988, 89. And driving with a buddy of mine. He was in the Marine Corps. And I was driving him. Matter of fact, I was driving him. He used to come up and spend the weekends in Los Angeles because he'd have those weekends off or whatever, and he'd come hang out with us. And I remember one time I was driving him back home. He lived in San Clemente. He was stationed at Camp Pendleton, and he had a place in San Clemente. And it's just killing time one weekend. I was driving him back home. This is around 1988 or 89. We were kids, And I was driving him home, and I threw in a cassette tape. This is how long ago this is. There were cassette tapes. I threw in a cassette tape, and it was Tom Petty doing this song. It was a song that I was hearing all the time. It was called Runaway Train. I don't know if you've ever heard it or not. It's a terrific song. Underrated Tom Petty song, Runaway Trains.
I'm trying to think. I keep hearing Refugee in my head.
No, it's around this. It's a little after that. This is a little late. This is about 10 years after Refugee. Refugee was like 78 or 79. This is later. It's about 88 or 89. Later Tom Petty. This is there, and it's. I can still remember the line. It was something it's one of those things that you could never explain. Like when something dies, like runaway trains.
Okay.
That was the name. That was the line in the song. And it was just this beautiful, beautiful track. And we were driving, and I remember he said to me, he looks over and he goes, there's something about this music that just says Southern California.
Exactly.
We were driving down, down to San Clemente there it's the 5 at that point. It's after the 405 turns into the 5.
It's very much,
Yeah.
um,
It's all of a sudden there's the sun's going down over
yeah,
the ocean, and he looks at me and he says, "There's something about this music that just says Southern California to me."
which is strange because he
He's from
wasn't.
Florida,
Yeah, he wasn't even from. And what was the name of their band prior to that?
Mudcrutch.
Mudcrutch. That's what it was. I was watching something recently that
Yeah,
I was like, that's a weird name.
but it's true that
And
there's something about that band that initially the first Heartbreakers group that was together for all those years, and that was Stan Lynch on drums, and just a terrific band. Stan Lynch on drums and Ron Blair on bass. That 5-piece band had a very particular heartbeat to it. It had a very particular sound. And when Ron Blair left the band in like '82, and Howie Epstein came in on bass, I thought it was really interesting that they didn't use session guys. They actually brought in somebody to be in the band. That's the way they thought. We're in a band. We'll make this band. Completely different from what I do, which is a guy who just plugs into different bands.
right.
Right. But there is something you can tell that the band changes at that point. It has a different thing. And then later on, some years later, when Stan Lynch left and got replaced by Steve Ferroni, who still plays. Well,
Right.
Tom's gone now, but
The Heartbreakers are still playing though. I saw
they may
I
still
saw
be playing.
there was an advertised show I saw recently.
Interesting. Yeah, but just to my point that like there is a group of musicians. And I just use them as an example.
Right.
But a group of musicians, it is an organism, that has a vibe, it has a feeling. And I know it's, when you play in different bands, that you can tell when people rotate out, it has a different feel.
Hmm.
And it's not the same every time. So, it is an interesting kind of thing when we're talking about recording or being whatever. Half of what you're doing when you're dealing with people recording and playing is learning to communicate with them. And so much of the communication is, particularly in a band, it's nonverbal. I mean, you're in a group of like 4 or 5 guys. How much do guys talk anyway? You and I are sitting here bullshitting because that's what we're actually talking about. But
Sure.
most of the time we wouldn't be talking that much. We'd be like doing something. We'd be like having coffee or like talking about the game or talking about guitars or whatever.
No, I think with us it's a little different because we don't see each other hardly ever.
No.
And so when we do, we have a ton of things we want to catch up on.
Exactly.
But
as friends would, yeah, exactly. As friends would do, yeah.
And it's I kind of want to touch back on a couple things. You had mentioned Tom Petty,
right,
and you had mentioned slide guitar,
right.
And so in my head, all I'm thinking is Jordan Shapiro.
You remember Jordan?
So I never met Jordan. I was a big fan of the Super Suckers, and Jordan Shapiro is apparently great friends with Eddie Spaghetti from the Super Suckers.
He occasionally plays.
Right. He's played on a lot of the albums, and he's played because I remember reading the liner notes because people used to do that before Spotify and all that.
Yeah, he records with them from time to time. And now I haven't.
And I had I remember putting something on your Facebook page one time, and Jordan Shapiro wrote something on there, and I had a fanboy moment, like, oh no, gosh, I've seen this guy on liner notes. And we had talked about you had done something with him where he made you watch a Tom Petty documentary or something.
First of all, I've played in any number of groups with him. And this was around the same time that I'm talking about. This was like before the bottom fell out of because there was a period there where we were all working a lot. And we were all traveling a lot, and we were all working with different people. And I think his sort of top thing might have been Super Suckers gigs, but he had a ton of other gigs he was doing. And he was playing guitar, but mostly in those days when I would run into him, he wasn't playing guitar, he was playing steel. And he was one of the guys around town everybody wanted a steel guitar to make it sound like more country. So he was getting a ton of work because he was a steel guy. It's like the old joke. It's like, is he a good steel player? Well, he's a steel player. It's like he was just around. Yeah. They just know that it's like this really cool thing that they set up and everybody goes, ooh, and he slides.
It's something that a lot of other people don't do.
Exactly.
So you corner that market.
Exactly. And it was very few people that were doing that. But we were in several bands together. We were traveling a lot. And I remember at one particular time we were working. I don't even remember who we were working with, but we were on the road, and it was the first time that we were actually on the road together. And I don't I don't drink or I don't do anything anymore. I'm Mr. Clean for many years now. And he wasn't doing anything at that point. And we were the only two guys that were clean on this bill. And he knew that. I didn't even think about it. And he pulled me aside and he said, I think we should room together, because we were like divvying up like the rooms.
Mhm.
And he was like, I think we should room together because you're not getting loaded. And I said, no. And he said, oh, well, it would be better for me. So we ended up being like roommates. And he's a good roommate on the road. There are bad ones, by the way, but he's a pretty good roommate, but he doesn't sleep. And I remember one particular time we were traveling. This was like around on that first trip, and we had to do, I think we'd done a gig in the morning, or I mean, a gig in the afternoon or something in the evening. We went back, and then we had a television show the next morning. It was like Good Morning Fresno,
Right.
or whatever it was. Yeah, I think it was Good Morning Fresno or something. And it was a pretty good market and whatever. And instead of just being on the show, we actually had to play. Like
I've seen some of those.
7:00 in the morning.
Yeah, I've seen the musicians play it in the morning, and even on the radio shows doing interviews in the morning.
It
It
was
is not
hysterical.
something that any musician really wants to
So
do.
we finished the evening show. I think we finished probably at like 10:30 or 11. It was like we were at the Fresno County Fair or whatever it was. Yeah, as I remember, it was like Fresno. It was a big stage. It was like in Fresno or Bakersfield. They all look exactly the same.
Sure.
But so then the next morning, and we went to the hotel and we were rooming together, and we had to be up at 5 in, and we to be at this TV studio to do the show. And we spent the entire night. He had just gotten a ripped like a DVD copy of this Tom Petty,
Was it
Running Down a
Dream? Yeah.
which was new. It wasn't even being shown on cable yet.
I think I watched it maybe 6 months ago, finally.
It's terrific. It's Peter Bogdanovich's movie, who is one of my, one of the great directors of the early sort of what they used to call New Hollywood, the early 70s. And he, Bogdanovich directed like The Last Picture Show and just great, one of the great movies of that era. But anyway, so it's a really terrific documentary. It's like 4 hours long.
Yeah,
and none of us had seen it, and we couldn't stop watching it. We're just gonna watch a little bit of it, and he had on the thing, and we were like, you literally could not stop watching that fucking thing. And I was like, all I could think of was like, I was thinking like, I can't stop watching this, and we're gonna have to be up at 5. It's gonna be brutal. So it was. Eventually, I said, "Dude, I've got to get to sleep." And I think he spent the next like 2 hours like under his covers. Or no, he just sat there. Like he put headphones on and he just sat there and watching it. I turned over and tried to get to sleep. And the next, when we just kind of like dazed through the morning, we did the show, and then we had a show that evening too. Trying
to nap it out.
Yeah, I think eventually we did get a nap or something, but I was like. But he's a good roommate, and he's a good player, and did any number of things together. He works a lot at home. He has a good home studio. He lives out there in that part of town. He used to live in Silver Lake. I think he's moved since then. But he's like me. He's the family man. And he's moved to a quieter place. Can you hear my neighbors?
Oh yeah, I don't know if I can.
I love it.
I don't know if I can broadcast copyrighted music like from.
It'll turn it off. So a lot of times they'll play this sort of hip hop stuff, and then they'll go to like sort of like a more like Latin sort of type thing. But yeah, no, that documentary was like, I mean, he was as fast. It's funny because we come from different kind of schools. He's a little younger than me, and he was definitely from more of a punk rock school.
Which is more the Super Suckers vibe,
right? Sort of punk rock that becomes alternative country.
I'm not sure if he played slide for Mike Ness's solo project too. I'm not sure about that, but I remember when he did that. That was probably mid to late '90s, and around that time.
I don't know. I honestly
don't know if that
don't
was
know.
him or not, but
I don't think it was, but I don't know.
Yeah, I remember there was slide was kind of big for a little bit there.
I don't think he was playing steel
or the lap steel.
He was playing steel. I don't think he started playing steel until the mid 2000s.
Okay,
early 2000s, something like that. Like he was a guitar player, and he was like in Seattle and whatnot. But yeah,
and that's where I was living. That's where I was stationed at in the Army. Was up in Tacoma.
So those guys,
and so the Super Suckers lived there at the time. Now I think they're down here.
I don't know.
But yeah, that's one of those bands where I keep trying to tell people like they're a great rock band, and everyone's like, "Eh, I've
Yeah,
never heard of them." And I'm like, "I know, please
it's a
listen."
tough world for rock bands right now.
And they have a great song called "Rock and Roll Records Aren't Selling This Year," and it's so spot on
So spot
still.
on.
And it's about 12 years old. It's still spot on.
Well, that was again what 12 years ago is what year would that have been? That would have been 2006.
Yeah,
So that's about the time that things started to change. Particularly like we were still pretty cranking along pretty good, and it was when things really slowed down was like around 2010, something like that, 2010 and 11. No, it was after I met you, like 11, 12, something like that. All of a sudden I noticed like people weren't going out on the road as much. I mean, 'cause it was cool because we might do a tour, um, like these really cool tours that we would do of all the county fairs. You do all the you get on somebody like a songwriter. You didn't even have to be a big songwriter. It could be like a local songwriter who was
right.
trying to break and had a good manager. Worked with this one guy who was an okay songwriter. He was pretty good, but he had a good manager, and he would like book us on these tours, and it was cool because like the money wasn't bad. The money was pretty good, but there was like decent hotels and decent food. What else can you ask for as a working musician?
Yeah, you're being taken care of.
Hmm.
That's all you
Yeah,
want.
exactly.
And to do your craft,
Well, do your craft and get a few bucks in your pocket, and
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah, well, that's why the band I'm in, we're just garage banding it basically. But it's interesting because two of the guys in the band run a professional sound company, and they're
right,
running festivals here and there,
right.
not huge ones, but decent size. We sound great. I
That's
don't know if we play great, but we sound great. And so we've done two shows. Where our thing is because we live in such a small town. I think it's 28,000 people,
mm,
and it's very rural, out in the middle of nowhere. And you saturate your market real quick
really
there.
fast. Yeah.
So we decided we're going to do two shows a year, and it's going to be a big deal. And so we make it a big deal. We let people forget about us for a while,
Right,
and then we play again. Of course, we're like, hey, if we can get gigs out of town, that'd be awesome. We're trying to refine our set,
right.
well, so we can have about 2 hours worth of music, but play our best 30 minutes.
And twice a year is gonna get. I would think interesting. I've had the same thought. Like 4 times a year was what I was thinking. I know that like because I play with the band that I've been playing with mostly the last year or two has been my own thing after all this time doing like it's doing all this sort of British invasion music that we do. And like it's band's called King Mersey, by the way. And we do a Monday night. We've been doing a Monday night residency in Hollywood at 3 clubs for the last 3 months or so. And it was really not what I wanted to do. The first 2 years of that band, I figured I would bring that band out 4 times a year. Because that's about what it just shook out to be. I
Hmm.
would get, and I never worked really very hard at getting gigs for the band. I would wait until somebody asked us to do it. Because I had other things to do. I like being in this band, but it wasn't something I was prepared to like spend all my time doing. And to break a band, it's like to break an act. It's like that's a whole separate job. You have to be able to work a market, and there's a lot of stuff involved in like promoting a band and stuff like that. I'm not going to do. I'm just going to play guitar. But I figured that like I was just going to be very fatalistic about it, and whatever if gigs came up. So it shook out to be about 4 times a year, and that seemed like it was enough for me. But I started working a lot, and recently with this buddy of mine who does a residency at three clubs on Tuesdays, and I really liked doing it. I would go like once every couple weeks. I would go out and play with him on Tuesday nights. It really felt good, and I thought, well, I really miss this. I'm gonna ask if if we can work out a thing for a Monday night. So we started doing this Monday night. And it's been really great for the band. The band is super tight right now because we're so well rehearsed just being on stage. And we did a gig a couple weeks ago. We did a gig at one of these things that we do at the farmers market in Los Angeles, Third and Fairfax, on Friday nights and Saturday nights. They have live music, and it's really great crowds and great people, and they're a lot of fun to do. One of the great gigs you can do as an alternative or an original band or whatever. And again, we do those maybe a few times a year. And it was great to walk in there after having done all these weeks at 3 clubs because the band was so well rehearsed. It was like, it felt like so great. And people were like, man, this band has really gotten great. And I'm like, it's just elbow grease. It's nothing but work. It's just, all it is just like, it's just like working the cobwebs out, like what you were talking about. So when you're talking about like doing twice a year, it's probably good for the market because it's so small. But
We had some friends that they used to play about every month or two,
I think that might be too much. Yeah.
and it's they're a bar band, so it was 4-hour sets, and it's just
That's too much.
you get burned out real easy.
And you
I
burn out
love
your
all those
audience,
guys,
too.
and they're great, and their songs are tight, and it's just I can't. I love them, and it's
A
just
quick way to lose friends too. Like
and they go, we don't expect you guys to stay for 4 hours. We get it.
yeah. I mean, well, not only that, but just like I mean, I always figure it's so funny how bands work. I mean, I can be really cynical about this. I think actually more realistic. It's like I can always tell when I'm playing in a club, a nice club with an act or something, and there's a band who's there before us, and they've got or I'm seeing a band for the first time, and the place is jammed, and it's just there's an electricity in the air, and I'm like thinking like this is gig one. This is everybody this guy knows from work. It's his family. It's all his friends, and everybody's in a great mood. All I can think of is I want to go to gig 3. This is gig 1. Let's take a look and see what gig 3 looks like.
Yeah, we noticed the other night there was considerably less people than our first time.
I know. It is. Like I always used to joke. It's like you want to lose friends, be in a band. Because your friends are like they're not even want to take your calls after a while. It's like can you come out? And somebody's like, yeah, I kind of saw your band already once before. So that's why I like to do that was again that was the whole thing about wanting a low pressure situation like on Monday nights. We're just literally like a band in the bar. You walk into the bar, you're going to hear our band. No, nothing fancy, and it's just us being great. And there's no pressure on it. Like likewise, like if doing that, like I was talking about the 4 times a year, those gigs that we do like maybe 4 times a year are gigs that have a built-in audience. Because again, like if you commit to bringing an audience to every gig, which I don't really think is even reasonable. I don't think that's reasonable. I think those days are over.
We keep talking to we have our drummer is in a different band, and they're really great called the Duendes, and they came to LA. They played 2 shows here, and it's a heck of a drive for us. It's or for them. It's about 2.5 hours to get to. They were playing on was it Hollywood? I don't remember where. The Study.
Yeah.
They played there, and then this other place, and they basically it was pay to play. I mean, they couldn't sell 30 tickets, to people down here, and there was only 2 or 3 people from where we were going.
Yeah.
And but they're getting out there and they're doing stuff, but it sucks because they're not really getting paid.
It's the thing is that I think we live in this sort of I'll try to keep these comments not cynical but also concise, which is that I think we tend to live as musicians, we tend to live in a mythology that's not accurate at all. With this idea that if you get out there and you spend all your time putting your band together, and you go and you do your first gig, and you can get a pretty decent crowd the first night. And then the idea is that like we live in this idea of like the 60s, like we're the Stones, and the Stones played their first gig at the Marquee Club, and the first night it was 12 people, the next night it was 50 people, the next night it was 600 people, and there was a line around the block. That's the stories that they tell. And some of those may be true, but those were stories from, you always hear about that, the Beatles at the Cavern. The first night there was 6 people, and the second night there was 25 people, and the next night there was 7,000. Those are stories. That's a mythology that has built up over 50, 60 years of telling stories. Partially that's part of it. The second part of it is none of that. That was a different era, okay? And that people went out kids, young people went out, and that music was happening at that time. We live in a different time now. This music is much more niche. Music has become much more niche oriented. People, I don't know of a person at all that sits in their house. Now, you may be this one person, but because you're a music lover.
I'm an anomaly.
Yeah, exactly. So you don't, let's take you out of the equation. I don't know of a normal person who doesn't have a dog in the fight that's sitting at home going, I want to go out and hear a band tonight. Nobody says that. Those days are over. The days of like, if you, even in the 80s and when I was coming up in the 80s and stuff, like people really didn't do that. What they did was they wanted to go to whatever was happening where they thought they might see Mickey Rourke at the club. I remember like I was playing in Los Angeles in the 80s, and I remember people would go out to your club if they thought they were going to see Christian Slater because it was a place he hung out, or Mickey Rourke. So if you were lucky enough to play at clubs like, I remember playing at like Madame Wong's in those days. And, you know, if you were playing like on a Wednesday night, there was never anybody there. And if you were playing on a Saturday night, there might be a bunch of people there, but they were there just to hang out. And they weren't really there. No, those days, that whole thing of like putting up flyers, and that is all myth. And we see more of that today. And again, this is my opinion, so I'll be willing to take, like, you know, people can argue with it all they want, but sure. I'm also talking with 30 years of experience playing in Los Angeles. That whole idea of like putting flyers up, we used to put flyers up on telephone poles. You're supposed to put
paste them and all that.
Right. And nowadays they plaster this crap all over Facebook, which it's such bullshit. It is such crap. There is you can, depending, like, again, if you only do it once a year and if you work the phones right, or you work your text right, and you email your friends, you can do it. You can build a pretty good attendance. I know some people that are doing something tomorrow night in Hollywood, and they've been working this event for weeks.
I'm sure you saw what we were doing. I was posting a bunch of stuff.
You know what? I have to tell you, I've seen little bits and pieces. I've gotten less and less involved in Facebook. And you know, it's funny because I work with this group, and people are like, you should make a Facebook event. And I'm thinking to myself, like, I didn't think of that. Thank you for that, because I don't fucking know how to tie my shoes. It's like, you really should make a Facebook event. I'm like, really? That's a great idea. The fuck? Like, I've done that so many times. And the reality is that the Facebook event, I'll do it a few times. But, you know, at a certain point, again, it's like, I've seen, you know, people, if you take yourself out of the thing and you think like, I'm just a guy looking at Facebook, it's like, dude, I've seen this guy's events before. I'm not gonna respond to this. I never respond to anything
unless it's a thing you're into already.
But, you know, again, if it depends on if it's somebody that I'm really, if I'm good friends with somebody. But at a certain point, I mean, I go to clubs for work, so I don't really think about like, I'm gonna go hang out on my night off. There are some people that like to do that. I don't do that. Some people really like to go hear bands. I don't know about that many of them. Most of them just like to go play. They'll go hang out to support their friends, so their friends come hear them. It's kind of like, I always make the joke, it's kind of like selling Amway or something like that. It's like, you know, like this, like, I sell to all the people who are also selling Amway, and we all just sell stuff to each other. And not that I'm not endorsing Amway, and I don't sell Amway. But my point is that
but if you're looking,
it's a joke. But the point is that like it's just all, we're all just playing to the same fucking people all the time. And I mean, I would like just go like, that's why you want to look for gigs, or like me anyway. I want to look for gigs, and I like gigs where I can go play for an audience. You know, I'm in a band. We're there to entertain. We're entertainers. We're not there to stroke our egos, you know, and play to our friends all the time. That's like, what fun is that? What actor would want to just sit there in his living room and do scenes for his friends all the time? No, you want to go be with an audience and communicate with an audience.
And you know, in our band, like I said, we're still in its really early stages of it, but you know, we're talking about eventually we'd like to get out to Bakersfield. Mm-hmm. We want to get out. We have some friends over there that they did a show at Jerry's Pizza. Apparently, that's a decent little place there. And then out in Victorville, I was looking at a couple little places, you know, to play. So for us, that's getting away from our normal friends crowd, and We
And
want to
it'll
see
be
how
so
it
good for you.
Yeah, we want to see how
Exactly.
it translates, and we might not be as comfortable, and we might not be as goofy or this or
You
that. But
might be better.
ooh,
You might be better. You might
we might
surprise
be.
yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's really when you that. And remember the first time. I've always made a joke that, like, again, having played here for so many years, is like whenever we would leave Los Angeles, I've always been surprised at how friendly people are, and how I remember like the first time playing in San Diego when I was probably, I don't know, I was a kid, and I remember like I was in a band in Los Angeles and we got a gig. We had to go down and play like at Winston's or whatever the name of that place was, the Belly Up or whatever that place in San Diego. The first time you're down in San Diego, and I'm like, these people don't, they're not busy posing and being cool and like being too cool for school, because like Los Angeles crowds can be a pain in the ass, particularly in those days. I don't know about what they're like. I mean, I would assume like I don't have the same interest in like what the audience. I mean, I know that like I have memories of like this sort of like almost like a low grade hostility. It's like well, okay, let's see what you've got kind of thing, almost like a disinterest. But you go to different cities, and all of a sudden, people were really interested in what you're doing. Especially if they found out you're from Los Angeles, they paid more attention. They were like, "Wow, these guys are really good." And that was my experience. Is like every time I would go somewhere else, or like when I was talking about like doing these county fairs and stuff like that, it was like audiences are terrific, really terrific. They weren't so busy trying to look cool, and Los Angeles audiences, like I really particularly like doing like stuff at the farmers market, because we have a lot of people that are there with families, and they're there to have a good time. They're there just because they're relaxing and enjoying themselves. They're
Have you
not.
ever run into a guy at a farmer's market named TJ in the suitcase? So
No,
he's
sounds fantastic.
so he's got this suitcase and he's got his little kick pedal on it,
Right.
and then he does the tambourine with his left foot, and he plays all these beautiful vintage harmonicas
Hmm.
and old harmonica microphones. And he came out to Ridgecrest for a birthday party of
Oh,
a friend,
right.
and his wife's a blues musician,
Right.
and
Does she sing too? Well, sorry.
not
Well,
not with him that I know of, but I'm gonna butcher her name, but I think it's a Geneva Magnus. Um, I think that's how you say it. I've
right.
never met her, so I don't know. But he's 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 wonderful,
Right.
and he plays the farmers markets as often as he can. I don't know which ones he does around here, but I know he plays almost every week. It might be out
That
in
sounds cool because he's
might
self-contained.
be
I
out in
like that
Santa
idea.
Monica or something. Maybe that's why I'm heading out that way.
Ah.
But that's who I'm going to meet after this.
Oh yeah.
But he came out and he put on a about 2.5 hour show doing that, and a
Does he
lot of
play out on the
originals.
on the promenade out there in Santa Monica?
I couldn't tell you,
I bet he
possibly.
does.
But he is just a fantastic musician. He just put out an album. If you get a chance to listen to it, you should. TJ in the Suitcase, and man,
I'll have to keep my ears open. I'm doing it. I've been doing a thing with it's funny. One of the things I remember I was thinking I wanted to mention to you was that a lot of the guys, the point I was trying to make before, a lot of the guys who grew up when I grew up, a lot of the guys that are my age playing music, I've noticed recently that we all grew up listening to this era of classic rock, that's from the 60s and 70s and stuff like that. And a lot of these guys that we listen to, we were too young to play in those bands or to play with those bands or to play around those bands. But so many of us have ended up playing for the sons, the children of these guys. Like, I know, like, I have a friend of mine who a couple of friends of mine who are always out with one of Waylon Jennings' son. They're out on the road with him a lot, and I've played with like the children of the Everly Brothers and the one of Glenn Campbell's sons.
Are the Everly Brothers making guitar strings? Is that what?
Yeah,
the
they
song?
do.
'Cause I used to play on the Everly Rockers.
Yes,
strings
Everly.
and the B-52 strings.
It was Phil Everly's company. He's passed away, but his family still owns it. Like, yeah, the Everly guitar strings. I think they own Cleartone too, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
I might be wrong about that, but I seem
No,
to remember.
that sounds right.
But yeah, and I remember like one of Phil's kids runs that company, and I played with one of Don's children, and then Chris Everly, a terrific singer, and then like I spent the last year or two playing quite often with Gene Clark from the Byrds, with his son, Kai Clark, who's a great songwriter and a singer. He reminds me a lot of his dad. Same kind of music, and he does a lot of his dad's songs. So it's funny. I grew up listening to the Byrds and playing 12 string and all that kind of stuff. Like I always loved that kind of thing. And here it is, all these years later, I'm playing those exact same songs, but I'm not playing with Gene Clark. I'm playing with Gene Clark's son. But we do a lot of those songs. We do Turn, 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 Mr. Tambourine Man, 8 Miles High. And everywhere we play, people love those songs, and it's like I had this sort of realization that a lot of guys my age are playing with sons of those guys. You know what I mean? It's like just by virtue of when we were born, we were too
Right.
young to do that.
And with that, we're gonna finish out here.
Sure.
But I wanted to thank you very much for getting me into the Who last year when we met.
Right.
I guess I just never, for me, I used to, I came up really musically was a lot of the late 80s, early 90s rock and punk and pop. And I guess I really missed like the Who and Zeppelin and Grateful Dead and a lot of these bands, because for me they were like the radio bands, and I didn't
Right.
want to listen to a radio band. I want to hear the other stuff.
Right.
And but once you what was it? Quadrophenia, was that the album that we
The one that
grabbed?
you
Or
bought,
was that
you bought
live?
Who's Next?
That's right.
Yeah. Which is
And
perfect.
um
Perfect record.
I listened to it on my phone all the way home, and then I
Yeah.
put it on the record player when I got home and listened to it. And I listen to it all the time now, and I'm a Who fan.
Oh
And
well.
but
I'm really glad that you bought that record, because it is a must-have.
I would agree.
I mean, it's like, yeah, I remember, like, I think I told you the story that my daughter, again, she's a teenager, and she walked in one day, and because I have all these LPs and vintage sort of gear that I've been collecting this, and she walks in, she goes, "I want to hear Who's Next," just out of the blue. She goes, "I want to hear this Who's Next that everybody's always talking about." She's been reading about it, and I guess all the musicians that she listens to.
Uh-huh.
So I put it on, and she sat there on the floor in my office. She sat there with, like, doing her homework, listening to Who's Next, like blaring, on vinyl. And she turned it over, and then when it was over, she looks at me, she goes, "That was pretty impressive." Just like that. She's so, like, she was like very analytical. She looks at me, she goes, "That was pretty impressive." And I was like, yeah,
Man.
I wish I could hear it for the first time.
Oh,
That's a terrific record.
well, I appreciate it. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
I hope you do it again sometime if we get a chance to come on out.
Thank you, and I hope that people will, if anybody listening comes to, we're at 3 clubs in Hollywood on Vine Street every Monday night, or check out, I'm on the road with Kai Clark, the Kai Clark Band. Any market that we're in, it's great. If you love those songs by the Byrds, 8 Miles High, and all that stuff, come see me, say hello.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again, Don.
Thank you. My pleasure.
And if you're listening to the podcast and you enjoy it, make sure you share, subscribe, download. It's on iTunes and SoundCloud. So thanks again, everybody.